All right, everybody. So this is a tiny explanation, or an example, I should say, of how the Apollonian and Dionysian analysis of a story can work out. So the allusions, if you're looking for the Apollo and Dionysus references, along with anything else you notice as being Greek mythology. I think there's a lot of other stuff in there too. So if you love Greco-Roman mythology, go for it, and you can add other things. But this is definitely a big part. I would definitely look out for other allusions. They're definitely there, including like Set Typhon, right? That kind of is Egyptian and Greek. But I just wanted to show you an example of an essay written by this guy named Art Posocco, that I found that was really great. That shows an example of how these forces that Friedrich Nietzsche talked about, using Apollo and Dionysus as these examples of the human condition of being torn between chaos and order, that Golding might be doing if you want to choose to look for these references for your illusions analysis for the story. Okay, so if you have not seen Lego the movie, this might be a little difficult for you to follow, but hopefully the essay makes enough sense for you guys to follow. It's just an example for you to kind of see how it all works, how that theory I explained in the lecture kind of works. So here we go. So I'm just going to read it to you. In The Birth of Tragedy, German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche discusses two artistic impulses: the Apollonian, named for Apollo, the god of the sun, and the Dionysian, named for Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry, which means partying. The Apollonian impulse is one towards rational order, stasis, which means things staying the same, and restraint, like having self-control. Okay. The Dionysian impulse, conversely, is one towards instinctual drive, so those kinds of animal parts of ourselves. That's why the gift shows that tiger, right? Movement, so lots of change as opposed to being static, right? And because chaos is change, right? And the dissolution of boundaries, so no rules, everything's chaos, okay? For Nietzsche, the impulses have their origins in natural states. He thinks this is how we are. Dreams for the Apollonian, and intoxication for the Dionysian. Nietzsche's purpose in applying the impulses to artistic creation is to demonstrate how they came together despite their natural tendency to oppose each other. So he's talking about how, ironically, they are opposites, and yet they work together if it's done right? If we need to find balance in our lives, we need to accept the Apollo and the Dionysus and try to find a balance between the two. But if we're too much Apollo, no bueno. Too much Dionysus, no bueno. Okay, and that's what you want to be looking for in this story. Anyway, back to that sentence. Nietzsche's purpose in applying the impulses to artistic creation is to demonstrate how they came together, despite their natural tendency to oppose each other, to create what he considered the greatest art form, the Attic tragedy of ancient Greece, represented by the plays of Aeschylus and Sophocles. In these plays, the abstract Dionysian music of the chorus is balanced by the structured Apollonian dialogue of the dramatis personae. So it's got this kind of emotional stuff with the music, and then it's got the rational arguments that are going on with the structure of the play and having things that make sense with the plot having a kind of structure. Okay. Though Nietzsche would later abandon this dichotomy means this contrast of the two, between the Apollonian and the Dionysian in his own writings, it persists in discussions regarding philosophies of art. So this is used a lot in art, like with what we're doing. Interestingly enough, the Lego movie, written and directed by Phil Lord and Chris Miller, is a clever and entertaining illustration of these dueling artistic impulses in practice. Through the film's primary conflict, we can see not only what happens when the two impulses work in opposition to each other, but we can also see what happens when they work together. So that's what we're looking for in Lord of the Flies. Who might represent Apollo and Dionysus? Do they work together? Are they opposites and they fight a lot? How does it resolve? If one side wins, which side wins, and what is Golding trying to say through that? Okay, and so in this case, Lord Business is Apollo. He's all about order, whereas Cloud Cuckoo Land and the leader of it right here, Unikitty, sorry about the bell, is total chaos, no rules, right? And Emmett is the balance between the two. He starts off loving order, and then he embraces chaos, but finds the happy medium between the two. So in the Lego movie, the Apollonian art impulse is embodied in Lord Business, played by Will Ferrell. His vision for the Lego world is one of strict order and formed boundaries. Indeed, he wants no intermingling between the disparate realms. Disparate means they're separated, okay? They aren't together. For example, the pirate Legos should never intermingle with the space Legos, and so on. Furthermore, Lord Business demands that all Lego people follow strict instructions on how to live and build. He even demands that everything weird be reported or destroyed. And he encourages everyone to follow the directions, right, that come with the Lego kits, which is like kind of life directions, right? Okay? Now, according to Nietzsche, the Apollonian art impulse is that of a sculptor. And to be sure, Lord Business's nefarious plot is to freeze all of the Lego pieces in place using the Craggle, which is actually just a tube of crazy glue, which is super glue, but it got because the glue spilled and got some of the letters removed, right? Thus, Business's plan for the Lego universe is for it to exist in stasis, right? To stay in order and perfect, just as the instructions demand. You don't go outside of the instructions. You follow them, and that's that. And he wants everything to stay perfect. Okay? So it's this deep need for control, right? So someone who has a strong Apollo in them would be maybe somebody who has like obsessive compulsive disorder, and they have to have everything just perfect. And if anything's messy, they kind of freak out, right? They can't handle chaos. Everything has to be orderly, and they need to know what's going to happen next, and everything needs to make sense and be logical, right? And it has to be clean. And anything out of order is just too much for them, okay? Now, when we first meet the film's protagonist, Emmett, played by Chris Pratt, he is all too happy to follow Business's model for life in Bricksburg, which is an Apollonian utopia of order and symmetry. He even has instructions for his morning routine, which include the instructions on breathing. Okay? He certainly has no desire to think outside of the box, to go beyond the strict Apollonian boundaries set by Lord Business. And this is a gift of showing how, if you follow the instructions, you will be happy and everyone will like you. You got to do this in this order. So he just follows it, and he does the same thing day in, day out. But this changes when he meets Wildstyle, played by Elizabeth Banks, who is a young woman seeking the peace of the resistance to stop the Craggle. Okay? All of a sudden, Emmett is introduced to a new mode of creation, one not based on reason and instructions, but on instinct and imagination. Wildstyle, in the way she can assemble random pieces into useful tools or vehicles on the fly, introduces Emmett to the Dionysian artistic impulse. Her very name is even Dionysian, right? Wild. She's wild. Her style is wild. She doesn't color inside all the lines in the coloring pages. She goes outside and does whatever she wants with it. In fact, she might rip it up and turn it into paper mache. Anyway, so completely foregoing the Apollonian emphasis on boundaries, Wildstyle takes Emmett beyond Bricksburg to other Lego realms. So he's leaving I'm supposed to be in the construction set, but nope, she takes him to all these other sets, right? Breaking Lord Business's rule, right? So Wildstyle takes Emmett beyond Bricksburg to other Lego realms, including one based on the Wild West and one that is the apotheosis of the Dionysian spirit, Cloud Cuckoo Land, right? Apotheosis is about... right, is this kind of like this like reason for being, right? This kind of like this kind of, just know that it's like the perfect model of what the Dionysian spirit is. Cloud Cuckoo Land is bananas, right? There's no rules at all, okay? This, to borrow a phrase from another film, is a land of pure imagination. Willy Wonka, anybody? Emmett is told that there are no rules and restrictions in Cloud Cuckoo Land. Anything goes. Indeed, this is where he meets Princess Unikitty, played by Alison Brie, an unlikely cat-unicorn hybrid, right? And if you can see here on the gift, she says, "And I welcome you all to Cloud Cuckoo Land. Here in Cloud Cuckoo Land, there are no rules, no government," right? She hates order. She wants chaos. In fact, she's a creative being. She's not even Lego. She's like Duplo, I think. I think? Maybe she's Lego. I can't remember. There are Duplos, too. But anyhow... So in Cloud Cuckoo Land, Emmett also meets the Master Builders, who have formed a resistance against Lord Business. And Master Builders are like Wildstyle. They're able to create things on the fly, right? However, Emmett sees that they are too disorganized to accomplish much of anything. They're so crazy they can't get anything done. They're reluctant to follow Emmett's example. They see him as a completely uncreative, one who is too reliant on orders and instructions. They think he's like a nerd, you know. But he eventually teaches them that some instructions can be useful. He helps them organize a plan to infiltrate Lord Business's tower. He balances their Dionysian spirit with some Apollonian reason and forethought. Similarly, during an earlier escape, Emmett is urged to create something to keep his group's vehicle from imminent disaster. He struggles at first, not having instructions handy, right, because he's too Apollonian. But the wise Vitruvius, played by Morgan Freeman, tells him to trust his instincts. Instincts are part of the Dionysus part, right, that animal part of ourselves. He does so, quickly attaching a wheel to his head and saving his team. In this example, Emmett's overwhelming Apollonian spirit is enlivened with the breath of Dionysian, right? Already had that part. Sorry. So there's that kind of the gif of Vitruvius, right? Anyway, the Dionysian spirit, according to Nietzsche, is best understood through music, movement, and change. That's kind of, even birds and dogs and elephants like music. This is why the master builders, Dionysian spirits all, have come together to stop the craggle, which will freeze them in place. However, it is towards the end of the film that we truly understand how the Dionysian spirit relates to Legos. Plastic toys, at first glance, are an Apollonian sculptor's tool. They're very orderly, right? When Emmett falls into a strange abyss, we are taken out of the animated world of the film and go into real life. We see that the entire story has been happening within the mind of a child who's actively playing with Legos. Then we meet his father, played by Will Ferrell, who is Lord Craggle in his imagination, okay? And we see the struggle between the Apollonian and the Dionysian even more clearly. The father chastises his son for playing with the Legos. They are his sculptures, and he wants to preserve them in crazy glue, based solely on the instructions. But he wants to, use them in different ways, the little boy does. However, he eventually sees the value in his son's seemingly chaotic and anarchic creations. He begins to see that Legos are not just an Apollonian sculptor's tool. They're also tools for imaginative, unrestricted Dionysian play. Yes, this is how plastic blocks can be invigorated with the Dionysian spirit, through the act of play. It's not about following directions and order. It's about just having fun. This gives them movement, narrative, and the ability to change. Now, as the father and son reach a reconciliation, so too do Emmett and Lord Business. The film is not necessarily trying to say that Apollonian impulse is bad. It is simply trying to show that neither impulse should be favored at the expense of the other. You need to find balance. Both the Apollonian and Dionysian artistic impulses have value, and perhaps, as Nietzsche suggests in The Birth of Tragedy, it is when the impulses work together that the best art is formed. Chaos and order working together. Now, how are we going to do this in Lord of the Flies? Well, what do you want to look out for? Of course, it's hard to say if this is on purpose or accidentally done by the author. A lot of allusions are accidental. They're not necessarily on purpose. But what can we see in the meaning by noticing these kinds of allusions to Apollo and Dionysus and even other Greek gods or Greek stories? Because it's definitely in there. It's not just Apollo, Dionysus. There's lots of other stuff I could totally see. Okay, but these are the biggies for the conflict and to understand the story for sure. So what to look out for? Who in Lord of the Flies might be Apollo and Dionysus? And remember with Over the Garden Wall, we thought that Virgil might be multiple characters? That could be here too. You tell me. Okay, who could represent Dionysus? Who might be Apollo? And is there like an Emmett in the story where that's like a balance, or is there an imbalance, right? Is there this fighting going on, right? And is there a side that wins in the end, or do they win together? Look at how the boys you think represent these forces treat each other and struggle, right? So if you think one character is Dionysus and one's all Apollo, look how they work together. Are they fighting as opposites who hate each other? Are they friends that work together and they're able to save each other? Or what? What do you notice? And look how they're described and characterized to fit the forces of these two sides. In fact, I'm going to say there's a character flat out that is described like Dionysus, flat out. Okay, so be looking out for that. Okay, I would say other characters are maybe symbolically representing the two. So you're going to have to look into that a little deeper. Okay, allusions can go anywhere from being pretty obvious to very subtle. And you want to be thinking, did they find balance, or did one come out on top? Is there a middle ground of peace, or will there be chaos because of that imbalance? And if so, what is Golding arguing through either the balance or the chaos that happens and the struggle throughout the story? Okay, and that's, remember when I said we're looking at internal and external conflict as one of the focuses for our house? You can do that with the allusions here, big time. Okay, so you can combine them together. You can have multiple hows in one ARN, right? So you could do allusion to Apollo or Dionysus, and you could do internal or external conflict, or even imagery, right? All at once, and symbolism. All those things could work together. Okay, so I hope that helped. Let me know if you have any questions. You can send me an email or come talk to me anytime if you want more clarification on this lens. If you want to look at the Greek classical allusions as a focus or one of your focuses. Bye-bye.